Hey everybody, welcome to the first episode of The Loading Screen. So this is going to be my video game related episode. It's mostly going to be news, might be some mini reviews here and there if it's not worth me dedicating an entire episode to reviewing something, but this is probably not going to be a weekly episode. It might be twice a month, once a month, just depends on when enough news for me to talk about comes out with. I'm not as fluent and I'm not as tied to video games as I am with movies, so very select stories do I find relevant to me. But for the first episode, I've got a decent amount of stuff to talk about. So first off, IO Interactive is planning on 3 seasons of Hitman. So Hitman is a game that's been around for quite a while. I've always been a big fan of it. I think Hitman Blood Money is probably the most popular one, but this most recent version of Hitman they're releasing as an episodic series, similar to what Telltale Games does. And some people like it, some people don't. I like it a lot. Now, the argument is that people don't think Hitman's a game that should be scaled into episodes and released, month by month. But the benefit to that is that you get a lot more motivation to explore individual episodes. Like they released the first one, and they have 60 to 70 challenges in these levels. There's dozens of different ways you can go about taking your targets out, how you escape, what disguises you find, and wouldn't be as motivated to explore all that and get all these challenges if you had all 8 or 9, however many episodes there's going to be released at once. So at least for me, the episodic structure works for it. Now, this news is coming out through their official Twitter account of Hitman. Announced this in response to a fan question that was asked on Twitter about a second season. So they said, yeah, we're planning a second and a third season. So, I don't know, they might be getting a little bit ahead of themselves. I think they need to wait for the reaction to the whole season as a whole before they start putting all the eggs into the basket of this episodic format. I've read just as many people who agree with me as I have people who can't stand it and they want the old Hitman back where you just get the whole game at once. So, might be getting a little bit ahead of themselves. And also, Episode 4 of Season 1, if you are playing Hitman, is going to be released on August 16th. It's going to take place, this chapter, in Bangkok. And the Club 27 mission will see players having to eliminate indie band frontman Jordan Cross and his family lawyer Ken Morgan within the confines of the Hitman Luxury Resort. Now, one thing that I will say sucks about this current incarnation of Hitman, the overarching story of this season, I don't even know what the hell it is. You get a little tiny bit of story before you start the mission, and you get one cutscene after you beat the mission. And from waiting a month to a month and a half between episodes, just those 2.5 to 3 minutes of story that you get once a month, it really doesn't have any relevance. I don't know what the overall game is going to be. I don't know what the relevance to the characters who are shown in these scenes are. There's no connective tissue. So to me, I just play it as a mindless game. I don't really worry about the story, but if you're here for the story, that is one negative for this new incarnation of Hitman. The NES Classic Edition. Now, this was announced a few weeks ago. It's going to be coming out in November 2016. It's like a little mini version of the old Nintendo system, and it's going to feature 30 games. I know they got some of the Super Mario Brothers games. They got Legend of Zelda. They got Mega Man. And the system's basically a miniature version of the original NES, which was released in 1985. Now, they're just now coming out with some press releases saying that the game system is going to feature a lot of different display options as well as permanent save points. So they have different aspect ratios, different version of pixels that you can choose from, and all the 30 games included with the console are going to feature permanent save points and instant temporary saves, which allow people to jump right back in without having to use passwords like they used to have or start over from the beginning of the game. So that's good for young kids nowadays to get into it. I think that if you took kids nowadays, even as old as 20 years old, and transported them back to the old days where we had to start the game over, or if you turned the system off to go to school or to go somewhere else, or the power went out, your life was over. So I think that would be a culture shock for kids. So I think that's smart that they're including that feature. Pokemon Go, a game that I have absolutely no interest in playing, but everybody is loving this and taking off with it, has boosted battery sales like crazy. Sales of battery packs, which are designed to charge mobile devices and phones and tablets, grew by 101% between July 10th and July 23rd, so not even 2 weeks. And in the 6 weeks leading up to Pokemon Go's launch, battery pack sales were only up about 4% from the last year. In the 2 weeks following the launch, it's been nearly 1.2 million units sold. So, damn, if they don't have some kind of Pokemon Go marketing going on with these battery packs, or if they don't have some, battery packs that are designed specifically for this game or something coming out, I'd be surprised. And also, for those of you who do play the game, the Pokemon Go Battery Saver Mode, which was removed from the app in an update, is slated for return, but no date has been set yet. So, sounds like this game is a serious drain. But it's the biggest mobile game that's ever come out in history. So, boosting battery sales like a son of a bitch. Batman the Telltale series, which I just had my review of the first episode come out yesterday, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested. They are having a lot of issues on the PC port. Surprise, surprise. So PC users are reporting a lot of problems with frame rate drops and glitches and things of that nature. Telltale has released a patch to fix a few of them, but not all of them. So they just had this big, huge debacle with Batman Arkham Knight earlier this year, where it did the same thing. The PC port was basically unplayable for months, and as far as I know, it might still be unplayable. I don't play games on PC, so I'm not a good person to comment on that. However, this does kind of make me want to talk about all the issues that we're having nowadays with broken games being launched. I think it's damn near every other major release that comes out nowadays, where about the day before or the day after it's released, you start seeing all this news about all these glitches and, the game's broken and the frame rate drops or there's missing parts, and the companies that release these games have to scramble around trying to release patches before everybody shits all over their game and returns it. And I don't know what the hell is causing this to be such a crazy problem nowadays. I remember the old days, what happened to the good old days where you bought a game and the game was fine for the whole time that you used it. You didn't need all these updates and patches, and you didn't buy a game and have to wait around to purchase the other 2/3 of it with DLC, and it's a really weird problem that we're having nowadays, and it seems like it's really plaguing Batman games lately. But I don't know what's going to fix it. It might only get worse now that they're starting to bring out games are only getting more technologically advanced, so they're only getting bigger. But that's a serious problem, that they're just launching games that they know are broken or that they don't think that are 100% ready, and they expect people to buy it and then just wait around for them to fix it. So reports that the PlayStation Neo are going to be revealed at a technical showcase in New York on September 7th and the Tokyo Game Show later on in mid-September. So the PlayStation Neo is like this mid-console generation release that it's going to be 4K supported, and it's going to have probably bigger CPU and all those different things. I don't know all the technical aspects. I know that the main selling point is that it's going to support 4K. So they're going to start making games that are engineered for this Neo, and it's going to be, however much greater this 4K is supposed to be for the TVs that we have now. I'm not on the 4K train yet. I'm one of the people who I'm just fine with 1080p, which was what we have. I think what we have looks amazing. I can't imagine it being that much better. Maybe I'll be shocked one day, but I can't see you making perfection that much better. So I'm not overly interested in the PlayStation Neo. I'm not interested in this, whatever it was, Xbox Scorpio, I think is what it's called. But a lot of people are. So they got the development kits are going to be sent out around the same time to all the developers to start developing these games, and they're also trying to keep everybody calm too, saying that even though all these new games are going to be engineered for the Neo, there's going to be a mode that will let the new games play on the PS4 just fine. So that is good if that is true. One thing I will say that's really weird that they're coming out with these mid-console releases now. PS4 hasn't been out that long. PS4 is an awesome console. I don't have Xbox One, but I'm sure it's pretty comparable. And Xbox is doing something even weirder. They got the Xbox One S that either just came out or is about to come out. And they're trying to get everybody excited for this slim version that's got all these new features and new CPUs and better batteries and blah, 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 blah. But then they got the Project Scorpio right around the corner, which is a mistake that Xbox has made numerous times, where they release something when they have something better around the corner and they expect you to drop money on it twice. So I think they're really screwing themselves with this. PlayStation's doing it a lot better, but I'm still not a big fan of this whole mid-console thing, or mid-console generation thing. But PlayStation Neo's around the corner, whether we like it or not. Alright, Battlefield 1's Collector's Edition doesn't even include the game. So, Amazon has got a Battlefield 1 Collector's Edition that is $130. And for your hard-earned $130, you get a 14-inch statue, an exclusive steelbook, which I have no idea what's going to be in the steelbook if you don't have the game, a cloth poster, a deck of playing cards, a messenger pigeon tube containing exclusive DLC that you will not be able to use because you don't have the game, a patch, and premium packaging. Man, that sounds like it's worth $130. I'm not a big collector's edition or ultimate edition or whatever else they try to tack on their editions fan. I like just buying the game. I'm not one for all this memorabilia and all this extra stuff that you need to find places around your house to put it up. I don't think it's worth it. I know a lot of people do who are insane Battlefield or Call of Duty or Halo fans. They go out day one and they buy the biggest, baddest collector's edition they can find. But it's really funny to me that they're trying to release one that doesn't even have the fucking game included. $189 is what you will have to pay if you want the game plus all that stuff. So I'm not a big fan of Battlefield. I gave Battlefield 3 a chance and I liked it okay. I bought Battlefield 4 and I was plagued with all the glitches that game had, so I couldn't even finish the game. And it deleted all of my save games whenever they did patch it, so I gave up on that game. I tried Battlefield Hardline, wasn't really impressed with that, so I've given up on Battlefield. But if you are a Battlefield fan, unless you're going to just be smart and just buy the game for $60, if you're into collector's editions, you're going to have to start saving now. So, Battlefield 1 Collector's Edition, not including the game. Is Telltale Games working on a Mr. Robot series? The Facebook and Twitter accounts of Telltale Games posted a interesting video advertisement for an upcoming messaging app that's created by none other than E-Corp. So for those of you who watch Mr. Robot, you know that E-Corp is the big antagonist corporation in that show. So this is making a lot of people ask questions. Is this just some sort of cross marketing? Or is this perhaps Telltale Games putting a few little hints out there that they're working on a Mr. Robot series? Now, Mr. Robot, if you're not watching it, is one of the most unique and craziest shows on TV, and that would lend itself perfectly to a Telltale Games. I don't know if it would be focusing on the main character of Elliot, or if it would be somebody else in his little hacker group or something. You know, I don't know where they would go. I haven't watched any of season 2 yet, so I'm kind of letting it build up a little bit so I can binge watch most of it. But I don't imagine it has much of a time jump between season 1 and season 2, so I don't think this is something where they would have it be like kind of like they did with Game of Thrones, where it was like in between seasons story. I don't think this would be something like a prequel, because that wouldn't make sense for the story of the show. Everything starts with the first episode, the pilot. So I don't know. I'd imagine it would be focused on somebody else inside his group, like somebody that maybe he sends out to do certain things. I think that would be cool, and that wouldn't mess up what they're doing on the TV shows too much. But until this is confirmed, I'll keep you guys up to date. That would be pretty awesome to me. You know, I love that show. I love Telltale Games, so that's something that would be really a breath of fresh air as far as some of the material that they've taken. So, you know, we got Walking Dead. We get a lot of comic type things. You know, we got Walking Dead. We got Batman. Now, if they did Mr. Robot, I think that would be pretty awesome. So look out for more confirmation on Telltale Games working on a Mr. Robot series. In celebration of Dead Rising's 10th anniversary, Capcom is re-releasing Dead Rising, Dead Rising 2, and Dead Rising 2 Off the Record on September 13th. They're going to be $20 if you buy them individually, or you can get them all for $50. I believe there's a disc-based version of Dead Rising and Dead Rising 2 coming later on. They're not going to be putting the Dead Rising Off the Record on a disc. That's something that's only going to be available digitally. But the games are fully remastered in 1080p, 60 frames per second, and they include all the DLC. So I am never been quite on the Dead Rising train. I tried playing the first one whenever I first got a PlayStation 3, or maybe it was Xbox. I think it was when I first got the Xbox 360. And it was okay. The thing that always screwed me up with Dead Rising was this mechanic that they had that is very, very outdated, where if you die, you lose so much of your progress that it's damn near detrimental. You know, I know that there's a thing where you go in the restrooms and you save and everything like that, but from what I remember, those restrooms are very few and far between. So as many times as I tried to get into Dead Rising, and I did enjoy the little bit that I did play on it, I just got really pissed off at how many times I had to restart and lose all this progress. And there's really no guidance in that game as far as what direction to take. I remember you could walk into like the hardest boss in the game right from the get-go, and you wouldn't even know he's the hardest until he just smokes your ass in 2 seconds. Dead Rising 2, I played a little bit longer. I don't remember what made me stop playing Dead Rising 2. I imagine something else came out that took my attention away. But I'm probably going to pick these up and give them a second shot, because, I mean, Dead Rising is a series that keeps coming. You know, they had Dead Rising 3 on the Xbox One that everybody supposedly loved. Now they got Dead Rising 4 coming out with the original character. I think his name was Frank West, coming back. So, I mean, people love these games, and they can't all be wrong. So I'm going to give it another shot when it comes out. I'll probably be more inclined to play Dead Rising 2 because I remember having more fun with it. But if you're a Dead Rising fan, you got some remasters coming to you very soon. The vice president of Bethesda Games, Pete Hines, has said that sequels to Rage and The Evil Within are a very strong possibility. So Rage came out, I believe, towards the end of last generation. You know, it was like a kind of a mix between Mad Max and like a shooter with like, I don't know how to describe it exactly. It was a lot like Mad Max to me from what I remember. And The Evil Within came out this generation. This was like I think it was the guy who created Resident Evil 4. This was like supposed to be his comeback. And I remember liking Rage, but I remember getting tired of it. And from what I remember, when that game came out, all the reviews were trashing how sudden and unsatisfying the ending of that game was. Now, I couldn't have been far off from the end, but I never made it to it. So I think a lot of people were pissed off because all it did was really tease a sequel, which now it sounds like we may get it. The Evil Within, I remember liking that one a lot more, but I was also not as impressed with that game as everybody else was. Yes, it did carry over a lot of elements from Resident Evil 4, which is always a good thing, but I remember it being very monotonous after a while. I remember the villain being really, really bad. I remember the ending of the game being very predictable and just a setup for a sequel. So I had fun with The Evil Within, but I wasn't clamoring for a sequel by any means. So he's saying pretty much that these games performed well enough financially to warrant sequels. You know, they were asking about some sequels that might be on the books, and those two names came up. So if you are a fan of Rage, and if you are a fan of Evil Within, it looks like we might have some sequels on our hands. Now, I would be more excited for an Evil Within sequel just because really good horror games are so few and far between. I remember the opening to Evil Within being absolutely awesome. I think you're limping around and you got this huge freaking guy with a chainsaw coming after you or something along those lines. If they can lock into more of that and give more of a hardcore, scary horror version of Resident Evil 4, that game could be something special. Rage, I'm not as excited about because I just, not too long ago, I just got done finishing Mad Max, the game that came out this generation. Which, if you haven't played Mad Max, that's an awesome game. It's great for any Mad Max movie fans. It's a lot more fun and deep and addicting than you would think a movie-based video game would be, because most of those end up sucking. But I got pretty much all of my post-apocalyptic car warfare, shooting, and all that kind of stuff out of my system with Mad Max. So they'd have to do something really new and unique with Rage 2 to really bring me back to that one. But like I said, if you're a Rage fan and Evil Within fan, you got a sequel coming at some point. Alright guys, well I have a decent amount of viewer questions for this episode, so it looks like you guys really love talking video games, because I usually have to struggle to find questions for movies, but man, I got flooded with video game stuff. Anthony Arviso asks, what's a video game genre or series that you can't get into for whatever reason but wish you could? It's pretty simple. I don't like all these massive multiplayer games that come out nowadays. You know, they got like the Overwatch game that came out. They had a few games before that that are really big. You know, they had like Battlefield and games of that nature where the whole game is focused around you playing online with other people. I'm not a fan of that. I don't really like online games or online multiplayer, period, really. I like focusing on the single player stuff. There are times when I like multiplayer, like I like co-op. But I really miss couch co-op, which is something that's slowly dying off. You know, even games that lend itself well to couch co-op seems like nowadays they're making everything have to go through the network. And, you know, I miss the old days where you just have a friend or your girlfriend or your son or somebody sitting next to you and you can just hand them a controller and you can both play the same game. I hate that nowadays you have to play with somebody in, you know, Taiwan or something like that if you want to have anybody with you. So these massive multiplayer games that they're really starting to come out with nowadays where they're really trying to gear towards that online community, that's something that I'm not bought into, but I wish I would, because a lot of people that I know are, and I'd like to be able to play and have fun with all you guys, but it just doesn't really interest me. So that would be my answer for that one. Lucas Van Eaton has 2 questions. Do you consider video games an art piece? Absolutely. You know, there's some stories that is told in video games that it's better than any story you'll ever get in a movie. You know, there's stories like The Last of Us and Uncharted and some of the Metal Gear games and like Silent Hill 1 and 2 and, you know, games like that where the amount of character development, the amount of emotion you get out of it, the amount of story beats you get out of it, you'll never be able to rival in any other art form. You know what I mean? Like, obviously I'm a movie whore. I have a movie podcast, but that's why video game movies fail so often, because they try to take such a huge, vast, rich world and they try to put it into an hour-and-a-half movie, and it never works because you miss out on so much, and so much just gets left on the cutting room floor. So definitely for story reasons, video games an art form. Now, the other part of it that makes it an art form is the interactivity. You know, you getting a character on a video game, their emotions and their struggles kind of imprinted onto you while you're playing it is something that, again, you can't recreate in another medium. You can't read a book, you can't watch a movie and get the same thing out of it. Like, you know, for instance, I'll use The Last of Us, which is one of my favorite games ever. Like the whole part where you're trying to save Ellie and you're going on this emotional struggle to, you know, take out these different guys that you've been working towards, and you are trying to save this little girl's life. If you read that on a page or if you watch that in a movie where everything's done for you, it's different. It's just it's a different experience than you taking hold of that person and, you know, you going on the journey with them. So absolutely, video games is an art piece. Your second question, the gaming community and culture have changed dramatically over the past 20 years. Where do you think we'll be in another 20 years? That's a difficult question. So nowadays, like I was already touching on, it's all about multiplayer. It's all about online communities. You know, we're starting to get things like Pokemon Go that makes everybody go out and kind of explore the real world. And then you get things like VR that's coming out that's supposed to have all this new interactivity, and you are kind of transported into the game and you walk around. And, you know, I think if they nail this VR thing, which I have my doubts because I'm not a big VR fan, if they nail the VR, then that's probably what's going to be the big thing in 20 years. Every video game you play is going to be inside this little headset. You're going to walk around. You'll see people walking in the mall and they'll just put a headset on and they'll start playing a game, walking around like people do with Pokemon Go, where they're just kind of pull their phone out in the middle of whatever activity they're doing. So I think that is probably most likely what we're heading towards. Other than that, it's just like I was saying with the online community, I think most games are going to be online related. And even though this really sucks, I think we're going to start buying games in pieces like we do with episodic series like Telltale games and Hitman. And, you know, DLCs become such a big thing where in some games they literally withhold, you know, a half to a third of the game with the intentions of you buying it later, instead of like in the old days where you get the whole game in one complete package and that's it. You know, DLC is cool sometimes, but when it comes to stuff like, you know, the most recent Battlefield game or a lot of Call of Duty games and stuff where so many maps and so many modes and so many different parts of the game are withheld for you to buy later after you've already dropped $60 on a game, I feel like eventually we're going to come to a point where pretty much every video game you play, you're going to get, you can either buy the whole thing for like a season pass, or you will spend, $5, $10, $20 or whatever, and you'll get the first third of the game. And if you decide that you're going to keep playing it and you like it, you're going to, spend another $20 or $30. I think that's kind of the direction that we're heading. And, there's good things about that, and there's bad things. There's definitely some games that I've dropped $60, $70 on that I wish I could have just played the first hour of the game for $10 and then decided I didn't like it. And there's a lot of games out there that I know I'm going to like the whole thing, and I don't want to bother trying to buy it in piecemeal. So I'm pretty sure that's the direction we're heading. So that's my answer to your question, Lucas. And my last question comes from Stephen Hughes. Old school Resident Evil versus old school Silent Hill. One basically created a genre, the other revolutionized it. Discuss. Well, I played the old school, the first Silent Hill game when it was released on PlayStation 1. I did not play the first Resident Evil until the remake came out on GameCube, so I kind of have a bit of a skewed perspective on that since I didn't play both at the same time. If I had to choose, I would prefer Silent Hill. Resident Evil is very cool. It's a very scary game. It's got a lot of really cool things in it. But Silent Hill, just the Silent Hill world is a lot more scary and a lot more rich to me. I remember playing that game and just being scared out of my mind. And I'm not somebody who scares very easily. So the whole thing with, the fog coming down and, whenever the horns go off and the world just transforms around you into this version of hell, like all that kind of stuff to me is a lot cooler than Resident Evil. And I love Resident Evil, don't get me wrong. The first one, the remake, is awesome. They got a Resident Evil 2 remake coming out at some point, but I did play the old school 2 and 3, Nemesis, and those are really good games. Resident Evil 4 is probably in my top 5 games of all time. I do enjoy 5. I absolutely hated 6, and I'm intrigued by what they're doing with 7. I think that Resident Evil as a whole franchise is better than what Silent Hill has done. I think only 1 and 2 are really the ones that are relevant as far as Silent Hill goes. But if I had to choose Resident Evil 1 versus Silent Hill 1, I think Silent Hill 1 was more revolutionary. I think it was more important to video games. And if I could only have one, I would have that one. But there's a ton of people who are probably completely disagreeing with me right now. But that's my vote. Garrett Leach, also known as Turd, asks 2 questions. Do you think they will be coming out with another Batman sequel? And if so, how will it play? At some point, I think they will. I think the Batman Arkham series is way too popular. It's way too financially successful for them to just leave it at 3 games. They didn't really... this is kind of a spoiler alert if you have not finished Batman Arkham Knight. So if you don't want to know the ending of Batman Arkham Knight, go ahead and skip to the end of this episode. But at the end of Batman Arkham Knight, Bruce Wayne defeats his inner Joker. He defeats Scarecrow, but his secret identity has been displayed to all of Gotham. And after for those who actually stuck through and actually went and got all the Riddler trophies and defeated all the supervillains in Gotham and locked all of them up, you, as Bruce Wayne and Alfred, initiated what they call the Nightfall Protocol. And this cutscene comes in where you pull up to the Wayne Manor, and everybody's snapping pictures. All the paparazzi's there trying to get questions about you being Batman. And you walk into the Wayne Manor and you shut the door with Alfred, and the Wayne Manor explodes. And then the credits roll, and there's a little stinger at the end of that, which shows 2 criminals in Gotham who are getting ready to mug or beat or rape somebody. And everybody's talking about how the Batman's dead, nobody's coming for you, nobody's going to come help you. And then this really ominous figure that isn't quite Batman, but something similar, shows on top of a rooftop, and it flies towards the screen. Now, for those that know the comics, the Nightfall is a series of comics where Batman retires, and he leaves the duties of protecting Gotham City to Azrael. Now, there's a mission in Batman Arkham Knight where you are testing Azrael to see if he is fit enough to take up the mantle whenever you leave. So they're obviously leading into that storyline. I don't think they're leading into that as an ending, because for those who don't read the comics, it makes absolutely no fucking sense. But for those who do read the comics, they know what you're in for. So Nightfall is when, it introduces the storyline where Bane breaks Batman's back, And, Azrael is basically a more brutal, less forgiving, less moral version of Batman, and he wants to come back and take back over and put down Azrael. So as far as a sequel, I assume they have to be working on something. Whether or not we'll see it within a couple of years, or it might come back in 4 or 5, who knows. I'd imagine we'd hear something within the next 2 years, especially with how big Batman is right now. With you got the Telltale game series, you got Batman v Superman and Justice League and everything coming out. So they're going to have Batman on everybody's minds. And I'd imagine as far as how it would play, you may start off the game as Azrael for that to make sense for the storyline. But eventually I'd assume you would take back over as Bruce Wayne or Batman and try to come back and take over the city. I would hope. I did like the Batmobile stuff very much, but I thought they really, really shoved it down your throat in Batman Arkham Knight, where every single mission damn near had something that you had to do with the Batmobile. I hope they tone that down just a little bit. And I hope they don't go out of their way to really expand Gotham more than they already did, because I love open world games. But something that's kind of shoots itself in the foot as far as my enjoyment of open world games is when it gets too big and too open, because by the time you drive from one end of the city to the other to get one mission done, you've already played for 45 minutes before the mission even starts. And it really cuts down on your gameplay. I'm somebody that focuses on story missions and side missions and all the little exploration tasks and stuff like that. I don't really like driving around. When Grand Theft Auto came out with the whole taxi cab thing, where or a lot of games that have like a fast travel, I'm always a fast travel whore. I'm going all over the city in 2 seconds. I don't like driving around and all that kind of stuff. Now, if they were going to expand the gameplay, I would think that they would keep the same amount of open world Gotham, but they would introduce maybe the Batwing or something like that to change it up a little bit. That would be cool, because we've seen the Batwing in just about every single one of these games, but we never actually got to control it. So that would be my assumption if they had a Batman Arkham sequel, the direction that they would take. Now, as far as who the villain would be, what the storyline would be, aside from the Nightfall storyline, I really don't know. I would assume that Azrael and Bane would be your main villains, but the Arkham series always does really good at kind of changing up things that we tend to know from the comics and from the movies and everything. So I look forward to seeing another sequel. I thought Batman Arkham Knight was the best one of the 3. So I really look forward to seeing what they're doing with that. And they also left a big story trail leaving with the Arkham Knight, or Jason Todd, where he takes his mask off and now he's wearing pretty much the Red Hood outfit, and he comes and helps you at the very end, but then you don't get any kind of resolve with that story. So maybe you'll take on you'll take on Azrael for a couple missions, maybe you'll take on Jason Todd or Red Hood for a couple missions, and then Batman comes back towards the end, or it could go 100 different ways. But whatever they do, I hope they get it out soon, because I love those games. And your second question is, what are some of the most overrated and underrated games there are? Overrated is something that you're probably not going to like my answer, little buddy, but anything with Call of Duty in the front of the name. I know Call of Duty is probably the most popular game in the world now, and for the past 5 or 6 years it has been. But at least in my opinion, I think it's one of the least deep and the least interesting and the least fun shooters that you can play. There's so many better games out there that have that shooting concept. I'm not a big first-person shooter fan for the most part to begin with, but I think the ones that do it really well do something unique with it. Call of Duty is basically, okay, just start and go kill who you can until you get killed, and then just restart and keep doing that. So I think those are the most overrated games that are out right now. I played Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare and didn't get all impressed like everybody else did. I played a decent amount of World at War when it came out. I've played Modern Warfare 2. I've played Call of Duty Ghosts. I played I think it was Advanced Warfare, whatever, the one that came out a couple years ago. And none of them have won me over. I think Ghosts is the only one that I played all the way through. And yeah, none of them have really done anything to bring me to the series. And I'm sure I'm forgetting a couple, but the other major game that a lot of people talk about is like this huge, innovative game that I just never got into. I mean, I bought the game when it came out. I played quite a bit of it, but just got bored with it very quick. I didn't see what the big deal was. Is Mirror's Edge. I know it was different for the fact that it was just literally the whole game was you running around trying to escape certain people and do certain acrobatic parkour type stuff, but I just never got why that game was hailed as being this huge innovative platform that, to me, it was never that. And they tried to do a sequel that everybody was clamoring for years, and all the reviews for the sequel said that it sucked. It was boring, it got monotonous, just like I felt about the first one. So the Mirror's Edge is another game that I think is overrated. As far as underrated, I kind of put a little bit of a list together. Now, most of these are from last generation because those are the freshest in my mind, but one that is actually a pretty old game, it was for PS2 and Xbox, and I remember because I rented it whenever we first moved here to Savannah. It's called PsyOps: The Mindgate Conspiracy. Now, I don't know if anybody remembers this game, but it was basically, you play this guy who, I forget if you just get endowed with these powers or if the government gives them to you, but you get all these different psychic abilities. You get pyrokinesis, you get telekinesis, and there's like 5 or 6 different psychic abilities that you have, and it's a shooter mixed in with these psychic abilities. So you can like throw a dude across the room and shoot him. You could light him on fire and throw him across the room. You could light a canister, like a red barrel on fire, and throw it across the room at people. And I remember it being an absolute blast, but that game never got any recognition. It never got a sequel, which it set up for a sequel from what I remember from the ending. I never hear anybody talking about it. Just that was a game to me that's definitely underrated. As far as some games from this last generation for like PS3 and Xbox 360, there's 4 of them that I can remember. Spec Ops: The Line, which is like a military, kind of like a Desert Storm type game, but it's very story driven. It's got, it's not the most original gameplay in the world. It's just a typical third-person shooter, but the story is very, very underrated. You play this commander of this little tight-knit group, and I forget exactly what you're trying to do in this country, but you're like in Saudi Arabia somewhere. And the moral choices that you have to make in this game, and the different plot twists that goes through, and what turns out to be, from what you think is just a typical shooter, what turns out to be like a in-depth, cerebral character study, was a really, really cool breath of fresh air for those kinds of games. Another one is Brutal Legend. Now, this is a game, I believe the guy's name is Tim Schafer. He does a lot of really zany, off-the-wall games like Psychonauts, and I believe he did Grim Fandango. But Brutal Legend was this game where you play a roadie voiced by Jack Black. And just like how Jack Black is perfect whenever he does voice acting for Kung Fu Panda, he was absolutely perfect in Brutal Legend. And the beginning of the game, you get transported to this heavy metal fantasy world, basically. And the game is absolutely hilarious. If you're a heavy metal fan, there is just calls to you from beginning to the end. You got Rob Halford voices one of the characters. You got Ozzy Osbourne voiced a character. I want to say Ronnie James Dio voiced a character. Like you have a guitar that you use for like certain attacks, and you have a car that you drive around on, and just the soundtrack to the game was awesome. Just Brutal Legend was an absolute blast for me, and that's a game that I always hoped would get a sequel that it doesn't look like it would ever get one. Another one is called Enslaved: Journey to the West. This was a game that I think I downloaded the demo off of the Xbox store or something like that one day when I was bored as shit, and I was like, dude, what the fuck is this game? And it was basically, it's hard to explain, but it's like a post-apocalyptic, futuristic game where you play kind of like a caveman. You're trying to get this woman who's like a cave woman to, across the land, the post-apocalyptic land, to accomplish something. Honestly, I can't remember. It's been so long, but the gameplay in this and the graphics were so damn good. You have segments where you're crawling up these ships as they're flying, which is crazy cinematic. You got sections where you have like these gigantic robot, like T-Rex things that are trying to come at you, and you got like this little kind of like a levitating skateboard that you're trying to get away from him with. Just a blast of a game that I've literally never heard a soul talk about. Enslaved: Journey to the West, and that was one of my best gaming experiences last generation. And the last one is Bulletstorm. which I think is probably the most well-known on this list, maybe aside from Brutal Legend. But Bulletstorm came out last generation, and this was a demo that I played that I wasn't expecting anything from, and it has a very simple premise. You got like a slingshot, you've got a gun, and you've got a sliding ability. And basically what it is, it's a play on a first-person shooter where instead of just running around shooting everybody, you try to make these creative kills, like slingshotting a guy into the air and then sliding into him as he lands and blowing him up. And like you have all these different like special moves. Like there's a list whenever you open up the pause menu of all these different special moves and what you have to do to the people to get that move. And it turns a first-person shooter into kind of like a puzzle game where you try to figure out, okay, how am I going to get this kill? And you have to look around, okay, well, there's my red barrel, or there's my zip line, or whatever piece of information you have on this little kill list. And you have to kind of play around and figure out how you're going to kill people in these crazy ways. And it was a really unique game. It was a lot of fun. I even liked the multiplayer. The multiplayer was really unique. It was endlessly replayable. I don't think I ever got all the trophies or achievements for it, but that was a game where the trophies and the achievements were fun and you wanted to get all of them. So if I'm not mistaken, I think I read somewhere that maybe they're tossing around the idea of a Bulletstorm sequel, but I remember that game was not very financially successful when it came out. But to me, those 5 games are very underrated. And anybody who, if you're interested in playing games from last generation, you're not just stuck on playing only PS4 and Xbox One games, check out any of those games. All of them should be really cheap. If you own Xbox One, some of these might even be on their little backwards compatible thing. But if you're playing PlayStation, you might want to just pick them up from GameStop or from Amazon. But all of those games are an absolute blast. And my last viewer question comes from my co-host, Holly Jones, who is sitting right next to me but felt the need to send me my question through Instagram. Are video games too far off from reality? All the video games we play, the characters can do so many amazing things. Is that something you like or dislike? Depends on the game. Some games you want that escape from reality. You want things to be larger than life because reality's boring sometimes. You want games like Uncharted where you do these ridiculous, over-the-top action stunts. You want games like Resident Evil and Silent Hill where you're in this different reality. You want games like Metal Gear Solid that has this crazy sci-fi futuristic things added to it. But there are some games that work well from being grounded in reality. Certain cop games, certain story-driven drama games are really good with that, but it just depends on the game. Some reality's great, but reality's boring sometimes. That's part of what's great about video games is and movies as well, you want an escape from reality. You want something larger than life to look at and to kind of marvel over and to experience. So that is my answer for that one, and that is my last viewer question. Well, that does it for the first episode of The Loading Screen, guys. Hopefully this was a good little change of pace for you, not just talking about movies the whole time. I'll try to look for some more things to talk about in further episodes. I know this episode was kind of light, but like I said, I'm a very selective gamer, so there's only certain stories that I'm going to read and I'm going to think is relevant to me. There's probably a ton of other things out there that you guys are clamoring to hear about and discuss that I probably don't have much to do with, but I'll try to gather some more varying stories for the next episode. But thank you for your participation in the viewer questions. I appreciate it. And go ahead and like and subscribe below on SoundCloud, YouTube, and Facebook. Leave any comments, questions, or your own views on some of these stories or my answers to the viewer questions below. And you can also catch me on Twitter using the hashtag the Cody Leach Podcast.